I want to talk to you guys today about PlayStation 4 emulation. That's right, emulating PlayStation 4 games on your PC. Over the last few years, we've been covering the idea of emulating PlayStation 4 games on your PC. And the first talk that we made was about 2 years ago when we talked about an emulator known as Spine, which was able to boot into Sonic Mania. And this was a very important milestone because emulating the PS4 obviously is very, very complicated. Now, since then, I'm happy to report that the premier emulator that is kind of the one that is considered the most compatible at the moment is known as FPPS4. Now, FPPS4 we did talk about a year ago now, and it was able to play around 50 or so titles that were considered playable, that went into game that you could actually start and play. Now, I'm happy to report that that number, since the last video that we made about FPPS4, is over 100. So we now have 100 or over 100 playable titles on the PlayStation 4 emulator known as FPPS4. And this is a fairly big milestone, and it's something that I did want to stop and celebrate and just kind of illustrate the work that is being done behind the scenes, because there is a lot going on when it comes to PS4 emulation. And the games that are now slowly starting to become playable, I've kind of illustrated in this episode here. And I'll leave all the names of the titles that I'm running in the description below, so there's no confusion as to what they are. But you will notice that most of these titles, in fact all of these titles, are kind of smaller 2D style games that, you know, use engines such as Unity or Game Maker. And this is not something that, you know, you should expect a big AAA release to be playable anytime soon. In fact, if we go ahead and try to launch Bloodborne, and I've kind of put Bloodborne in my list of games here just to see where things are at, you can see it completely crashes, nothing actually gets started. Now, since I looked at FPPS4 last year, I can definitely notice some improvements. Obviously, the compatibility is improving every single day, and as you can see here from this compatibility list, we're getting more and more titles that are considered playable. But I will be very clear with you guys that even though we're at 100 titles that are playable, I believe that represents about 6% of the entire PlayStation 4 catalog. So that is still a very, very small percentage. And again, these games are considered indie 2D indie style games for the most part. We are slowly starting to see some 3D games, or these more traditional 3D games, start to, you know, boot into the title screens and maybe show some semblance of rendering, but we're certainly not there yet. And if I was to predict how far away we are from seeing AAA games like Bloodborne and Elden Ring and Spider-Man booting into in-game with graphics, we're probably at least, and I'm being very, very generous here, probably at least 3 years away from something like that, possibly longer. Now, I think it's important to stop here briefly and tell you guys about fake PlayStation 4 emulators. This is really something that I feel is my duty to actually call out every single time we talk about PS4 emulation. And what I'm talking about is, if you go ahead and Google PS4 emulator, let's say you want to download a PS4 emulator, right? And you'll see that the first hit that you get here is an emulator called RPCSX, an open source beta PS4 PS5 emulator and debugger written in C++, allowing you to play PS4 games natively on PC and Mac. This sounds too good to be true, and it is, because it's complete bullshit. Now, if you click on this link, you can see that there's this kind of fancy page about PlayStation 4 emulator for PC, open source, multi-platform, experimental, written in C++. It's saying all the right things here, but if you basically go down and look at some of this stuff, you can see that there's like these benchmarks of Ghost of Tsushima running at 4K and Spider-Man and Bloodborne at 1080p, and apparently these are some screenshots and what have you. Let's go ahead and click on one of these right now. You can see here that it's allegedly running Ghost of Tsushima here. Let's kind of skip through this, and it's got some, overlay of the performance and stuff like that. I'm here to tell you guys that this emulator is complete bullshit. This is an absolute scam, and you should not download and install this emulator at all. I'm not really sure what it's actually doing, rather if it's just, this website is here for some SEO farming and making, money off ad revenue. I'm not really sure what the intent is, but if you go ahead and look at the download section here, you can see that there's like downloads for Mac and Windows, and apparently 260,000 downloads for Windows, which is complete bullshit, and 120,000 for Mac. So don't download this emulator, guys. Now, of course, FPPS4 is not the only PlayStation 4 emulator in development. There is another one that has been in the works for the last couple of years known as RPCSX, and this is kind of the follow-up, if you will, to RPCS3, the PlayStation 3 emulator. And one of the original developers from RPCS3 is maintaining and working on RPCSX. And this particular emulation is not using a compatibility layer, rather it's using a traditional emulation, and from what the looks of it is, I believe it's also requiring a PlayStation 4 decrypted firmware, because we're slowly starting to get into safe mode, we're getting into the user interface here, and this is a different approach than FPPS4, but it's not necessarily for better or for worse. I think ultimately it may end up being the more compatible of the two emulators, but as it stands, there are other PlayStation 4 emulators currently being worked right now, and this is a great thing for the scene. And there's already signs of that emulator running some, simple homebrew, running some smaller games, and even getting into the PlayStation 4 user interface. So this is very, very promising stuff as well. Now, if you do want to download and check out FPPS4 for yourself, it is available on the GitHub link, and I'll have that in the description below. I will be very, very clear that there are definitely some hoops that you have to jump through in order to emulate PS4 games on your PC. The first one, of course, is you need a pretty beefy PC to get any decent level of performance, but the more important thing is that you either need access to a hacked PlayStation 4 in order to basically dump your own games and have them running on your PC, or you need to be able to access fake packages on the internet. Now, of course, for legal reasons, I'm not going to tell you how to do this, but fake packages are out there. Now, the idea of what a fake package is, essentially when a PlayStation 4 game is built for submission, it is built in what is known as a package file. And that package file, of course, after it goes through certification and is made available on the PlayStation Store, is encrypted. And there are some smart members of the community out there that obviously have built fake packages which allow you to run and install these games on a hacked PS4, which you can run on any PS4 up to version firmware 9.00, that is. And FPPS4 obviously is looking for these fake packages or these decrypted packages for you to actually use. So there's definitely some hoops that you need to jump through, and there are some really good video tutorials out there about how to set up and use FPPS4, and I will leave a link to one that I recommend in the description below. It is by fellow YouTuber Mr. Sujano, who is really an awesome emulation YouTuber, so definitely check out his channel and throw him a sub as well, and tell him that I sent you, because he does amazing videos every single day. Now, one thing I do want to mention is FPPS4 is not an emulator in the traditional sense. In other words, it doesn't emulate the CPU instructions one instruction at a time in the kind of traditional sense of what we would expect emulation to be. In fact, FPPS4 is what is known as a compatibility or a translation layer. Because the PC that you're on is x86 and a PlayStation is x86, then there can be some assumptions made to just simply translate the calls that are made on the PlayStation 4 side across to the equivalent on the PC. And a great example of this is the underlying rendering subsystem. So the PlayStation 4 has no concept of what OpenGL is, or Vulkan, or DirectX, because those APIs don't exist on the PlayStation. Instead, a proprietary graphics API is provided on the PlayStation 4 hardware. And such, the emulation needs to know what type of graphics call is being done on the PlayStation side and come up with an approximation or some type of equivalent on the PC side. And the same rules apply for all the different subsystems that make up the PlayStation 4. But one of the great things about FPPS4 is that because it is a translation layer, it doesn't actually require a PlayStation 4 firmware to be installed. Much in the same way as on the PlayStation 3 with RPCS3, you need to download a firmware and install it first before you can play games. You don't need to do that here. All you need to do is find some games, extract them via a fake package manager, and then boot into them. And hopefully the compatibility list will continue to improve and you'll start to see games slowly become more playable over time. So this is a very exciting milestone for the future of PS4 emulation. Obviously there is so much more work that needs to be done, but I did want to stop here and take a moment and just kind of call out the amazing work that's being done in the PS4 emulation scene. I think things are definitely going to get better over time, and I'm here for the ride. When we get to 200 playable games, we'll do a follow-up video, or if there are other advancements that are made in the PS4 emulation scene, I'll definitely be reporting them on this channel, so stay tuned. But for now, guys, we are going to leave it here for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.